Hello, and thank you. I'm truly honored to be here. As you heard, I'm developing That Dragon Cancer with Ryan and Amy Green and 3 other very talented folks. For those who aren't familiar, That Dragon Cancer is a poetic, surreal video game, and it's based on the experience of Ryan and Amy and their family as they try to raise a son with terminal cancer. Today, I want to talk about one of the themes we're working hard to communicate in our video game. And it's a concept that the Greens have come face to face with on several occasions in their journey. And it's also one that we experience over and over again as we develop this game and share that with people. And that's, of course, the concept of grace. And I want to introduce you to that by showing you some home videos.
Out of the office, took down the college picture frames, painted all the walls yellow, 'cause it goes with anything. Put those cards on all the outlets, found a safer car to drive, did it all for your protection.
Oh, doggy kisses, huh?
Couldn't see it till you were teaching us then how precious life is.
What do you think, Joel?
What is it? Oh, don't.
I saw you in that picture when they said you were a boy. Though I swore I had no preference, those words fill my heart with joy. My face to that decade, I was
Oh my goodness!
hear you tell me all your trouble, I think everything alright. Couldn't see it till now. You were teaching us then how precious life is. God willing, if we have another child, I'll see it for the miracle it is. I'll be hanging on to every blessed breath, 'cause I can't forget.
You see, part of our goal with That Dragon Cancer is for players to love Joel. And even though he can't provide much of anything in return. And while you were watching that video, some of you laughed or smiled or felt compassion or sadness out of sympathy, or maybe all those things at once. In that short time, you too might have started down that path, loving Joel. Isn't that funny how that happens? I mean, why did that happen? Did you estimate some potential resource you would gain and decide it was worth it? Was it due to the supply and demand of karma points or some other economy of love? Is it a protective instinct that makes our species more efficient? A conventional approach to designing this video game would have us asking these kinds of questions. But how does one calculate a parent's love for a dying son who can't easily express any love in return? In game design terms, the economics of this system don't seem to add up correctly. How then should we design this? To answer that, we need to take a step back. Games teach us things. That isn't really debatable at this point. To some degree, the process of playing a game is a process of learning. When we play games, we learn how to move through a space effectively. We learn how to deconstruct and organize. We learn how to think ahead and strategize. And we learn how to manage limited resources. We learn how to find efficiencies and optimize. We learn how to rationalize, as Paolo put it. We're not just learning cognitive skills, though. We're learning about a brand new world. What is this world like? How is it built? What's true and false? What should and shouldn't be done? What are the goals and how are they reached? How are things progressing? All these seem like natural questions to ask when you're playing a game. According to the philosopher Leo Apostle, these 6 questions are the elements that make up a worldview. Worldview has been explained as a commitment that can be expressed as a story or in a set of presuppositions which we hold about the basic construction of reality, and that provides the foundation on which we live and move and have our being. When put this way, it becomes clear that when we design game worlds, we encode them with a worldview. Our game worlds are realities that we express. Into them we add rules. And those rules become presuppositions for agents that live and move and have being. For the sake of playing a game, the player adopts that worldview. And they temporarily pretend to replace their current worldview with the world of a game. And just like how we can have an awareness, or lack thereof, about the holding of those presuppositions, the act of encoding a worldview into a game as part of the design process can be done with an awareness or lack of awareness. Why should we care about this? Ryan and I seek this awareness in game design so we can be intentional about that encoding. As Christians, we believe the rules and events of our world point to a creator. So if games have a worldview embedded in them, those presuppositions would point to one or more creators, which means what players learn when they play our games says something about who we are as people. That makes us responsible for not only the symbols, but also the systems of our creation. But it goes even deeper than this. With a video game, we create our entire world from scratch. And when the player agrees to inhabit our world and begins asking questions to gain a worldview, every answer she receives has our fingerprints on it. We not only have a responsibility, we have a presence. Playing a video game we create is having a conversation with us. The player asks a question, and we provide an answer. In his book, Phantasmal Media, D. Fox Harrell explores the concept of worldview in media, starting with an example of an everyday sign representing women. He breaks it down further to propose some beliefs that would go into the creation of this icon. Women are people. Women are feminine. Women wear dresses. By going through this process, we start to realize this sign is based on a cultural assumption some people hold about how women present themselves in public. It's a concept that forms a particular worldview. Here he provides examples of what might constitute the concept of a woman in other parts of the world. This comparison helps to make us more conscious of worldviews inherent in this iconography and how the original example might not fit every case. By simply assuming existing design conventions, we as designers risk adopting systems that were created by others with a worldview that doesn't necessarily match our own. The danger there is that we may be sending mixed signals to the player, like using an icon with a dress in a culture where women wear saris. A system we adopted out of convention might be telling the player one way to feel about a situation, when really we want to communicate something completely different. It is in this context that we begin to realize how to design this video game and why we choose to focus on the concept of grace. We like how Jonas Kiratzes, developer of The Sea Will Claim Everything, explains it. Grace in the sense of transcendence, in the sense of something being more than the sum of its parts, in the sense of a salvation or elevation that comes into being even though all our flaws mean it shouldn't. It's as real as love, though equally hard to grasp. Grace is when two sides of the equation don't match, but the thing works anyway. Grace is the absurd yet wonderful fact that sometimes you get out more than you put in. Based on this definition, you might assume we are opposed to systems and part of the schism between logic and feeling Frank Lance referred to in his GDC talk, Hearts and Minds. That's not really the case. In fact, 4 of the 5 members of our team are competent programmers and have written at least some code for our game. Ryan and I don't believe grace abolishes the law. We believe it transcends the law. In this context, matters of equation aren't bad, they're just inappropriate. If you were to ask Ryan and Amy about their 4 years fighting cancer with Joel, they would give you a testimony of their journey that included specific moments of grace. And given the chance to make a video game about it, grace is the first part of their story Ryan wanted to share. Our first demo is a chapter entitled Dehydration. It represents a condensed version of a night Ryan spent in the hospital with Joel. Joel had recently been through some treatment that had left his immunities low. And then he got a stomach bug. He began vomiting, and whenever something was given to him to drink, he'd vomit it up. So he was admitted to the hospital, and Ryan went with him. That night, Ryan spent 6 hours in the hospital caring for Joel, which we condensed in the game to about 10 minutes. He tried everything he could think of to make him better, walking him around, bouncing him, ordering some mac and cheese, which normally he loved, giving him some apple juice, which he normally loved, putting him in the crib to lay down and rest, picking him up, lying down with him. Hours went by, and still nothing worked. Joel wouldn't sleep, which made it even worse. He called Amy and begged her to come help him. "I can't do this," he told her. Eventually, he just got to the end of himself. There was nothing left to do. So he stopped and rested, and he began to pray. He thanked God for good things that had happened and for the help and love they'd received. And at that point, Joel fell asleep, and he got better. For Ryan, that was a profound moment of grace that taught him a key part of faith includes rest and thanksgiving. Our dehydration chapter is about what happens when the mechanics of life fail. And it's about the kind of grace Jonas referred to as a salvation or elevation. When we encounter moments like this in our lives, a Fallout-style karma system or a zero-sum exchange between people where one person gains what the other loses doesn't really help. We believe what does help is a love relationship, the kind of love that gives freely without really needing anything in return. That brings me back to loving Joel. When Joel began to go downhill, even more than needing oxygen permanently, the point where his doctors said there wasn't really much reason to feed him anymore, our team canceled all our GDC plans and prepared to visit Joel. In my mind, I would either say goodbye or get one last chance to play peekaboo like we had so many times on Google Hangout. Or I would see him miraculously healed as Amy had envisioned and written about on Joel's blog for years. Unfortunately, several of us on the team did not get a chance to say goodbye. There was no last game of peekaboo. He passed away 2 hours before my bus would pick me up to go to the airport. Our trip became an opportunity to prepare for a memorial service. A couple of us on the team and Malika from our documentary crew poured over hours of home videos in an effort to create a series of short videos that would show people what Joel loved. And the video I showed you was about his love for dogs. He loved them dearly. At Joel's service, his teachers came up to speak about how they immediately fell in love with him and how he loved to sign, how he loved to give them hugs, the kind of hugs that leave you little bits of pancake on your chest, since he loved pancakes. His teachers. See, it's easy to forget that Joel was diagnosed terminal well before most children learn to speak. And there's no earthly reason a terminally ill child should receive any kind of education, especially after the second or even third time he'd been given a month a month or two to live. But Amy envisioned Joel living a full life and leaving a legacy, and he will leave a legacy. And that meant going to school would just be something he did, just like any other boy. And thankfully, we live in a country that still upholds some values that are not purely based on economic benefit. Families have a right to this choice, and we all have a right to education, even though any of us might die tomorrow. In this case, the system was not balanced correctly. A terminally ill boy, supported by taxpayers, going to school to learn sign language. The two sides of the equation did not match up. But you know what? It worked anyway. School improved Joel's quality of life, and Joel changed the life of his teachers. They will never be the same. Watching one of his teachers sign how she loved him during the memorial service with tears streaming down her face was one of the most beautiful depictions of love I have ever seen. After his memorial service, we gathered together as a team to talk about our next steps. We decided we needed to step back and reassess our direction and probably reduce our scope. One thing Ryan wanted was to refocus the game on showing players what it was like to be with Joel and to love him. I realized Ryan wanted to recreate the experience of Joel's teachers. He didn't really put it that way, but in hindsight, that's what it was. We would try to encode the kind of grace that resulted in Joel's relationship with his teachers. A love given freely, despite the fact that Joel can't really do much in return. Part of that encoding involves creating a sense of being there with Joel. And that involves creating a sense of immersion. Immersion is one of those really interesting things that happens when you interact with a computer and your input has an immediate, continuous audio-visual response. The computer actually starts to replace your senses. Other things around you fade away, and you are drawn into the computer's world. So we use interactivity mostly to create a sense of immersion, instead of using it for decision-making or creative expression. We do want the player to have agency, but not really the kind that changes the story to her liking. This video game is a testimony, a very vulnerable, brutally honest testimony. It's about sharing events that have already happened. So instead, the agency that we're enabling is related to how those events are explored, observed, interpreted, and received. Receiving is how you experience grace, because grace is a gift. So far, our focus on immersion does seem to be working. It's been amazing to see kids sit down to play our game in particular. Our video game's not the kind of experience that you'd think kids would be into. It's very adult, it's slow, it requires patience, and there's poetry in it, for crying out loud. But time and time again, we'll see an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old come and sit down for 10 minutes and play all the way through our demo. They continue to defy our presuppositions of what the attention span of a child should be. That's really something that doesn't add up. You'd think kids would just want to play something fun. Last year, Ian Bogus gave a great talk at UX Week about fun. He seems to be developing a new theory about fun, and his talk seemed to be an introduction to that. His conclusion about fun really caught my attention. Fun involves treating things like their existence is reasonable, having respect for something that doesn't deserve it, but doing so anyway, giving it anyway, and occasionally catching sight of it blushing when it opens up to reveal its secrets. That sounded just like grace to me. Grace involves treating other people like their existence is reasonable. It involves having respect for someone that doesn't deserve it, but doing so anyway. That is the kind of fun we're hoping to find while designing our video game. And it's the kind of fun we hope players will share with each other after they play. I've invited 2 others to speak, David Ossett and Malika Zuali-Worrell. They're filmmakers who are making a documentary about the development of our game. They're going to share some of their experiences, including some of the reactions we've received. Before that, however, I want to share one specific reaction from a player and how that communicated grace to me. We were at Gamescape, a very underrated games festival that's part of Artscape in Baltimore. It was late July of last year, and if any of you can remember, we were in the middle of an intense heat wave. Artscape is an outdoor arts festival, and for those who attended, that show involved walking for blocks in the blazing hot sun looking at art. Gamescape, on the other hand, was in the small atrium of an art school where there was air conditioning, and we had been placed pretty close to the front door. The phenomenon that resulted was almost cartoonish in nature. In fact, we started to get the sense that for some people, the most profound artistic experience they'd have that day would be the experience of walking into the atrium and feeling that sweet, sweet blast of air conditioning. We would see people come in out of the heat, many drenched in sweat, and the look on their faces was of incredible relief. Shortly thereafter, they'd come to their senses, look around, and seem to think to themselves, well, I guess I should just check things out. One such person was a dirty, rough-looking older man that came in and sat down to play our game. And I immediately thought to myself, well, I guess we're going to be his excuse. And right away, he really struggled. I don't just mean playing our game, but struggled with using a computer in general. He kept needing me to help him with something, simple things like using a mouse or navigating a simple 3D space. Every minute or so, I'd have to crouch back down and help him out. I was happy to help and willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but as a game designer, this was painful to watch. Pretty soon, I had basically written off this playthrough as a failure. I did the calculations and concluded this man would have no reaction or connection with our game. But by the time he was about finished, he completely lost his composure and started sobbing. I was so surprised. Ryan came over and comforted him and started talking to him. And after he regained himself, he seemed inspired and passionate. It turned out he was a devout Jew, and Ryan's prayer, which is a raw, guttural, intimate prayer, really connected with him. He could relate to the prayer of a desperate man reaching for God. The scruffy man, the kind of scruffy that draws suspicious glares on the street, came in and he could barely use a computer, and he fumbled, and he had the worst demo from a user experience point of view. And yet, it worked anyway. And he had the most intense reaction out of anyone at the whole festival. His devout faith gave him a willingness to receive, and even in the midst of the messiness and the sweatiness of life, what resulted was an exchange of grace. It is this exchange we seek with every player that sits down to play with Joel, to play that dragon cancer. Here's David and Malika.
Hello, my name's David Ossett, and this is Malika Zuhali Worrell. We're making a film called Thank You for Playing, which is about that dragon cancer. We have a 90-second teaser that you can watch that'll show you a little bit more about the film, what it looks like.
To me, this is more than a video game. It's a means to be able to talk to people. I wanted to talk about my son. I think there's so much that I don't know because we're doing something that people just don't do. It's like, I don't know, do you point a camera at somebody on their deathbed? Like, I don't know. I can get so busy doing this game for Joel that I'm not playing with Joel. I don't know the ending. It's about what do we do in the middle of it.
this is a way that I can honor him while he's living, and even making a game allows me to escape. But you can't escape forever.
So we found out about That Dragon Cancer from a one-line entry in Killscreen, and it said, the creator of That Dragon Cancer writes about the crushing difficulties of making a game about his son who has terminal cancer. We met him before. He's a really nice guy. And that's all we knew about it. And we went out to Colorado to meet Ryan and Amy and the family. And at first we were really interested in the content of the game, what the game would be, but also the implications of the work that Ryan and Amy and Josh and the whole production team were doing, transmuting this reality into a virtual one. And we were curious at first. We were kind of wondering, how's this game? What's the game element of this? And we realized not too shortly after we started that it's sort of an interactive documentary. Ryan and the team are making an interactive space to experience Joel. And that's been really fascinating to us, and also been really exhilarating to see that something that we can call, like, quote unquote, a video game has the ability to awaken this sort of empathy in people. People have used art to express themselves for thousands of years, but I don't know that there's anything quite like this that I've seen before, especially because Ryan, he's an independent game developer. That's his paintbrush. That's what he's using to share his story with people. And that's been really exciting to see. And we saw it in full force when we went to filmed at PAX, and you saw a little bit of footage of that in Seattle last September. And Josh was talking about experiences of people playing the game, how people just kind of play this demo and get very emotional and just cry after 10 minutes of playing it. And what's really impressive is just that even though the game is based on a Christian foundation, people from all different backgrounds and all different sorts of people who have played the game are just really incredibly moved by it, because it's such a relatable story, and it's a story that everybody can put themselves into. So that's been really fantastic to see.
And I think we've been especially amazed by the openness of Ryan and Josh and Ryan's family in letting us film what is essentially an incredibly tough moment. I mean, they've basically let us, complete strangers, into their lives to film some of the most raw, intimate, and difficult moments that anyone could face in their lifetime. And I think that's kind of a testimony to the degree of honesty that Ryan, Josh, Amy, the whole development team are using in the process of sharing these experiences, not only with us as filmmakers, but also in the game, in That Dragon Cancer. Of course, the meta nature of this situation has not been lost on any of us. David and I are essentially making a documentary about a guy making a documentary. And the occasional interaction between both of our creative documentary endeavors has been one of the most intriguing aspects of this process, especially when it involves a scene that Ryan has created, often very surreal, expressionistic scenes created for the game. When those moments start to enter into real life, I think that's been an especially intriguing process for us. So to give you one example of that, one day David and I saw a piece of concept art for That Dragon Cancer, for a specific scene in which Ryan's avatar is floating in water, more or less suspended, fully clothed in a seemingly bottomless ocean. And when we saw that, we were just blown away. It just seemed like an incredible, especially given the time we'd spent with the family, it was a really incredible representation of the very profound, difficult trauma that Ryan and his family were going through with Joel and his illness. And so we spoke to Ryan, and we asked Ryan to recreate this moment for us. So we got him in a swimming pool, fully clothed, and filmed him underwater with a GoPro camera. What's interesting is that it wasn't long before Ryan had actually taken the GoPro out of our hands and was filming himself underwater, because he realized that this was a moment to capture the underwater experience as research material for the eventual animated version of this scene that he wanted to create in the film. So what was interesting about that was this virtual underwater scene, essentially a figment of Ryan's imagination that he'd used to express what he was going through and his trauma, became a moment in real life, and it became a moment in our film, and is now a fully fledged scene in the game. And I think that kind of interaction has been one of the most intriguing parts of the process of creating this film. So Thank You for Playing is basically a film, tells the story of Ryan and the development of that dragon cancer. And it's a film about the process of creation. It's a film about life and death. And it's also a film about what it means to try to preserve something that you love and share that with other people. So you can find out more about the film at thankyouforplayingfilm.com. We also have a Facebook where we post updates, and you can contact us on the email and Twitter feeds there. And we also want to say thanks to Josh and Games for Change for letting us share the story of our film with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.